Well, why don't we start by approving those? Since this is, we're supposed to, we're chartered to meet every quarter. And this is 1 year. We are 1 year, 1 day short of 1 year. The last meeting was on the 28th of January last year.
Really? Wow.
So,
Boy, if we don't do a better job, we'll probably get fired.
you promise?
I don't hear anyone calling for that. Not at all.
So, anybody want to make a motion about approving the minutes?
I make a motion to
I will
approve.
second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I am not a voting member, so I can't vote.
All right. So has everybody had a chance to review the financials, the mysterious financials?
Yes.
Yes.
Perhaps John can tell us what they mean, because damned if I understand what they mean.
I just
Well-
understood there was more in than out, and that was good. We netted several $100s, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's see. I was going to go off of, we had so many emails going back and forth here. So let's see. Yeah. So last year, our last full year, we collected about $1,230 in revenue for fiscal year 20. That was a little bit down, but probably not to be unexpected given the fact that the spring season was such an odd occurrence. And, we weren't open for a great number of months due to our own revenue, our renovations. So probably not unexpected that we were a little bit on the downside on the revenue side of it. And of course, expenses, we had a number of different items in terms of preparing for meetings and so forth. And we actually, Mike had a chance to attend the Harbor Masters Association, or we got the membership set up, right?
Yeah.
So we had that in there, but we're on the plus, we're in the green, which is always the place we want to be. So I would anticipate, in the coming year, we'd be much more on the plus side. Usually we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1,800 a year in our revenues.
We're down about, if you total up the people who haven't paid yet, there's about $1,000 or somewhere plus $1,000 plus that have yet to be collected. And that's one of the things I want to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but just in terms of break even for last year, we are absolutely in the green. And of course we have this year to come. And I would imagine there's a lot of people that want to do nothing more than to get out on a boat and be on the harbor. So I suspect the business will be very, very good for us in terms of the mooring fee side of things this spring. But I don't know, Paul, is that probably, I would imagine you'd agree with that, I suspect. Am I right?
I would expect that, yes.
Yeah, good.
Well, there's somebody who's pushing the envelope because David Belknap said he saw somebody out paddling last week.
Whoa.
And it wasn't me.
I was going to say, was that you on your paddleboard?
No. But there was evidently somebody out there who was pushing the envelope, getting a jump on 2021 boating season. Well, let's talk about where we are with the draft ordinance. And John, did you get a chance to review the things that there were some unresolved issues that you had?
Yeah.
That
No. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Mike. Yeah.
Well, I think Harriet, who no longer is working with you, did the type up of the draft, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I picked it up when we were putting this meeting together. I dusted off, I blew the dust off the copy and in the computer sense, right? And I picked it up and I said, boy, I'm not going to do anything to this. I want to really come back to the committee and make sure, everything in here is as you wish it to be. But I also had a chance to talk with Peter Drum about some of the changes that were in this draft. So I don't know, as I said, it's been a year, so there may be some things that the five of you, maybe different views of, or what have you. But I did get a chance to talk about some of the changes that were included in here. So I don't know, Mike, if you want to go, kind of through the ordinance, through each of those changes, and I can at least provide the thoughts that either I had or Peter gave to me, and I'm glad to, share those with everyone else, or whatever's easiest in terms of how you want to work through this.
Well, I think the committee as of its last meeting,
Mhm.
had done everything that we wanted to do and had made all the changes and passed it on to you.
Okay.
And with the next step being, hopefully, there was somebody at the Harbor Masters meeting that I went to. It was the representative from the Corps of Engineers who
Oh, yeah.
is very familiar with all of the harbor ordinances in the state,
Mhm.
volunteered to review it once we thought we were
Yes.
ready.
Mhm.
But we got to go through the changes that you talked to Peter Drum about first.
There we go. Great. Yeah. So if you like, I can share this on the screen, and I can do, Paul, I'll do my best to try to provide the color commentary here so you can get a sense of but I think you have some paperwork right in front of you. Is that right, Paul?
I do.
Wonderful. Okay, great. So let me just share my screen here so that you can see what I'm looking at. Can everyone see the Word?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. So yeah, obviously I'm just kind of zeroing in on the areas of changes that I'm noticing in the document. So if there's anything, again, I was a bit apart from the last conversation, but if there's anything that I've missed, just yell out and let me know, okay? Because that very well could be the case. So the first section of changes that I saw was really on page 2, which started with the Harbor Committee is authorized to, and there's some here in section C, D, and E that with some minor change. So my chat with Peter was really much more focused on Title 38 and compliance with Title 38, that being the state statute for harbor management. And so a number of the thoughts that he had relate back to that. And so I'm certainly glad to have him come in if we want to have him have a chat with the committee, but he didn't have time today. I have him actually heading to another meeting as well. But in part, what the only question he had was really in terms of section D, where it talks about overseeing the harbor district system.
Which section is that? And
So I'll highlight it here. This is D, 4.2D, which I think previously, indicated oversee the harbor master in the implementation of the provisions of this ordinance. And then that was amended to in this draft that I have. And again, we may have something different here, but to establish and oversee the harbor district system for mooring, permit management in coordination with the harbor master and administering towns. So does that look as you would thought it would, or as it previously did? Great. Yes. All right. Good. So the thing that Peter mentioned to me is there's sometimes if we try to specify too greatly in terms of areas or provisions that are meant to capture a specific instance, sometimes there's the omission. Those not included can be problematic in enforcement. So his concerns here were just in the change of the language. Of course, Peter was involved with the initial drafting of this as well, but he was a bit concerned in terms of the changing of the district system as opposed to the harbor master in the management of. And so it was, he said he'd be glad to take a swing at kind of crafting what we wanted to in here. He just wanted to make sure that he was capturing maybe the intent of the committee, and neither he nor I could really kind of come from, other than what I was sensing from the committee from this, is to really talk about the mooring, permit process, and to try to ensure that the harbor committee, and the administering towns and the harbor master are kind of all linked in trying to ensure that we're overseeing that permit system. That's what I was getting from this language here. If there was anything else I'm missing, maybe I didn't portray that to him, but is there anything else in that, or he just wanted to tighten up the language a little bit from his perspective? So
My reaction is it's neither limiting nor is it an overreach.
mhm.
From a legal standpoint, I can see though his point, given that we wouldn't want to exclude mention of the ordinance itself. We might say something about implementing the ordinance, including but not, all aspects of the ordinance, including but not limited to the mooring system, et cetera, because there's a lot in the ordinance about aquaculture, mapping, other elements that aren't as narrow as just mooring. So as long as the attorneys always seem to like this, for example, but not limited to, or
Exactly. Yeah.
kind of
Well,
language.
it seems to me that unless we have Peter's language, we're not going to get any place.
On that one, yeah, I think that's true. On that one, I just want to make sure, I'm glad to kick this section to him. I just want to make sure I understand the intent of the committee in terms of making a change. So I'm glad to go back to him and say, Peter, clean this up. Here's what we want to accomplish in this area. And that we can do that quite easily. But I just want to make sure I'm gathering the intent of everyone. And as I said, what previously really was the focus of to oversee the harbor master in the implementation of the ordinance. That was really kind of that it was a tighter fit. Now it's really, I think we're talking more about that, the issues that we've had in particular of the mooring system and that, how that's been difficult to work with. But that's my interpretation. So I just want to make sure it's the committee's interpretation, before I take it back to them.
Well, I mean, I think it's important that it refer back to the ordinance.
Mm.
And I think,
agree.
so I would defer to what he thinks is legally the best language to use, and have him
Okay.
draft it, and we'll revisit it.
Okay.
But let's
I'm-
continue on.
Great. And the second one really is in his view, E, right below that, it's the non-compliance of what was his question to me. And so it seemed that is in relation to immediately what's above, which is that the permit mooring management and the harbor district system. So I think both of those issues tie into each other from what I can see. So if you want, I can have them look at both of those instances. Great.
And,
Yeah.
and digging back in my memory a little bit to D,
Yeah.
I feel like there was some reference to it being more of a partnership with the harbor master, because it was sort of in consultation with, rather than like we're the boss of the harbor master, but it's a collective effort among the town staff, the harbor master, and the committee, rather than we are the board to the harbor master as executive director or something like that.
Right, and the harbor master is definitely a member of this committee, but I think he's, as he pointed out, a non-voting member.
Ex officio.
Okay. Well, great. So that's something. Oh boy. See, this is what happens when you start doing some things here. Okay. Great. Okay. So moving through 4.3, the concern he raises here in these A through C section predominantly is the issue of he's concerned with perhaps the issues of having conflict of interest laws and is trying to ensure that everything is neither representative of anything else and could be in conflict with anything else. So the prior section, which just simply says the 6 members, rather than to describe which their interests were, and then concurrently then going through B, it's the expansion of the committee itself might lend itself to where one town's influence is larger than the other. And so that was probably when I sent out my email to you guys, well over a year ago, that was a concern that I had, and it's neither here nor there, neither, it doesn't, we've had members, Alan was I think a Damascotta member, lived in Newcastle, or who knows, I don't think where we are right now, it's not a concern, but obviously you're right, the ordinance with the worst case in mind, some cases. And so,
Well, so couldn't we
yeah.
have language in there that says that in order to, that we would only add one member from each town, if we want to add from one specific person, we have to add a second. So to keep it equal?
Keep balance. So whether we have 6 or 8 or 10 is an equal number between the towns. Yeah, that might work. Yeah, absolutely. So I can have him look at that. Let's see. He did have some concern about taking this language out of the staggering of the terms, but he said there may be a simpler way to get there. His concern was if for some reason everyone resigned at once, through what method would we use to appoint members to reconstitute the committee? But he wasn't too concerned with that section.
Is that a concern for any other committees of either town? I mean,
well, I'd say it's a fairly common standard that you'd see in usually it's in bylaws or organizing documents of town committees. You would have some methodology in terms of how those terms would be staggered. It seems a little bit unnecessary, and I can understand why anybody, and even I, would delete it at this point, given that this is a full-formed committee. But he felt, well, just what if, so I was leaning on his experience in that, but he also said he felt like he could find a more artful way of putting that together as well. So,
well, then he should be the artist and submit us a drawing.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So moving through to 4.4. So this was an area he was pretty intent on, and so these sections mirror what's in Title 38. So he was, I guess, when they originally were drafting this, what they had discussed was actually just simply citing statute and walking away from it. But instead, what they decided to do when they were drafting this is to list each of these duties of the harbor master, so that they were, perhaps it's redundant to then also cite the statute. But the idea was to make sure that those residents and all of us, many years down the road who were looking at this, were abundantly aware of what the responsibilities are of the physician. So he was concerned about removing or making any amendments to this section at all.
So the way it originally was straight from Title 38.
That was.
Well, particularly though, this 4.4, the first section about carrying a weapon.
Yes.
that's, we got to get that one right.
Mhm.
I think that Title 38 leaves it open that the harbor master can, I mean,
Mhm.
it doesn't prohibit, it says
Right.
the permission is there.
Mhm.
So in the future, if we ever hire a harbor master who accepts his salary and wants to pack a gun,
Mhm.
we wouldn't have to change the ordinance if it's more permissive.
Very true. Very true. I would, as the administering town, we hold the insurance and the liability on the position, the harbor master position. So to me, if that would be a longer conversation with the town of Newcastle in terms of whether or not they would support, that change in that provision, or someone in that position being someone who would carry. At present, if we were going to move in that direction, I think we would want to be closer to either that's a policy we wanted to pursue, and we would need to show some sort of evidence to the board as to why we wish to pursue that. I think I agree with you. It's sort of as making it permissive would allow us to easily, move in that direction in terms of the committee's interest in having someone in that position. But I don't know at present that either I've seen or that we've been able to evidence that there's an immediate need for it. So I think changes to this ordinance wouldn't be difficult to accomplish. Certainly less difficult than it's been over the last year on a very narrow focus like this. So this would also be the only employee of the town that can carry. So it's for Newcastle, it would be a bit of a new world. If we're Damascotta, perhaps it'd be a little different, perhaps.
I wish that we had Title 38 or Peter with us, because
Mhm.
my recollection is that that Title 38 was moot and didn't speak. This paragraph that is in there that says the harbor master shall not make arrests was added when the original document was drafted by the towns.
Mhm.
And I think that we added that in our discussion by
Mhm.
committee.
And I'm hearing that's a good thing, because it narrows the insurance requirements of the town as the employer of the harbor master to have that in there. It seems like we could quickly, if there were a change needed in the future, we could convene fairly quickly and make that change. But at present, it helps the town because it doesn't add to insurance costs, is how I'm hearing it.
That's right, Stephen. Yeah, that's right.
And it doesn't change the, what shall I say, the feeling of the town. I think if we put in that the harbor master may carry a weapon, that is a different way of looking at the boating situation. Yeah,
The whole tone changes if that's in there.
Yes.
that's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe that since I was involved in the original draft, that this was at Paul's request, that he did not want to have arresting authority,
Right.
or I can't precisely remember, Paul, but wasn't this there at your request?
If I had to carry a weapon, I would probably step down from this position.
Yeah. But I think, that, we put it in there just so that
I don't think originally there was any language either way. It didn't, it just
how
didn't.
did it get in there then? Well,
I don't know. I have it. It's typed in the version that I'm looking at. It's typed in red, like the other changes that were added
Was that right? Oh, okay.
committee, yeah.
So right now, are we at the point where we're willing to keep it, and if we needed to change it, that would be a reason to change it? We convene to change it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sounds like, yeah.
I'm in favor of this language, yeah.
I'm more concerned with striking out A, because I'm not sure that acceptable is the best word, but that is where there are differences of opinions of people who want a mooring in front of their house. Right, Paul?
Yes.
So I think the effort of having A there is to empower the harbor master to determine acceptable, appropriate, safe locations, or determine the locations. I don't know why of uses and uses is in there twice, but we don't want negotiation, or we don't want Paul to have to negotiate what the definition of acceptable is. Right, Paul?
True.
He has the authority, or we invest in him the authority to say this is and this isn't. But I think that needs to be said so it's not challenged with the placement of new moorings.
That sounds good. And it sounds like from Peter's take that John conveyed, we need that first line because it is consistent with the other parts of 38.
Mhm. That's right. I mean, I agree that acceptable is a bit of the eye of the beholder situation.
What if we just said determine locations?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, dude. All I'm offering is that in terms of the consistency, if we deviate, then we're owning that deviation, whatever that may mean in the law. And so I don't know that I would, if we're going to maintain consistency with 38, Title 38, I don't think I would remove or alter any language, whether it's this section or, there's a couple others down here. I think we would be assuming some responsibilities there we may not be aware of or prepared for, perhaps.
Without having Title 38 in front of us, it's hard. I mean, I have no difficulty with changing it to, putting it back in and having it just say determine locations and uses. But I think it's best if it is consistent with the regulation. So unless we have, I think we need Peter to compare what we got with the ordinance, and so that when we have our next discussion, we know whether we're deviating from the way the ordinance reads or not.
Right. Well, and I'm certainly glad to, if there are specific items that we want to incorporate in terms of policy directions that the committee wants to pursue, and to see if there are, places around Title 38 where we can operate in those areas. I'm certainly glad to give those to him and say, this is what we have, but we'd like to do A, B, C, and D. I think we can absolutely do that. I think that, I would probably suggest that as I'm certainly giving this to him, and he and I went through this line by line. So he's seen this, he knows 38A. And so I think he's pretty confident with the direction or the recommendations he's given me. But what I would say is if there's additional items that we're trying to accomplish, then, I'm certainly glad to pass those along too, so that maybe there's another way to get to the same result, you know?
The problem is, I don't know, and I don't remember, and maybe David or somebody else remembers whether when we changed these changes that are in red
Mhm.
came out of our discussions the last time around, which was
Mhm.
over a year ago.
Right,
I
right.
don't know. At that time, we didn't compare these things with what was in Title 38. So it's kind of a waste of our time to go through this exercise without having Peter and 38 in front of us, I think.
Okay. Well, I guess, and I'm certainly glad to have him come in. All I guess I'm saying is, if there are directions outside of this, then we should say something. Otherwise, this isn't, the language we have here won't work. So we can come back to, and I'm certainly glad to have him come back. But if there's a policy direction we want to draw from this, I'm glad to pass that back. I guess what I'm saying is that the language right now is a non-starter from his perspective. So if we can find a way to get to the policy and meet goals, maybe there's another way for him to attack the problem.
Is it a problem, Paul? Have you been challenged when you have said this is not a proper place for whatever?
On a couple of occasions only.
And how was the challenge resolved?
He pulled his weapon and told the guy that's where it's going.
No, we had a little chat about it, and in 2 cases it was resolved
So
with
perhaps
the
perhaps
party
we don't
involved.
need to be specific, John, and it could fall within H, promote voter and public safety within the Harbor District.
Right.
So Paul says, I'm making that decision based on number H if he's challenged.
But for example, that's one of those examples. Voter and public were inserted in revision. I don't know whether the original Title 38 had that in it or not. And if by adding it, we're making it more controversial. So that's why I continue to say I'd like to.
But this is our ordinance. 38 is the federal government or something, isn't it?
No, it's the state.
State of
law.
Maine. Okay.
Yeah. And again, so just to maybe jump off of A for a second, or what was deleted A, going to B, for example, it talks about oversee their inspections. So we had a long chat about the fact that inspections, even though, in this instance, Paul isn't necessarily, in every case, going down and inspecting himself. He is the one who is initiating that process, which is all that needs to be handled in law to be able to say he has conducted the inspection. So the same way in which if there was an issue and he had to call the sheriff for some reason, that would still be under his authority. So, for example, something like that where it says oversee their inspections, that creates more problematic than to simply leave conduct inspection. So again, if there is something that we're trying to get through to that, we can absolutely have, find a different way to get there. But to oversee their inspections, one, it's different than what it's called for in statute, but then 2, it's not as faithful a reading of it, I suppose. So,
but overseeing is what Paul does, right?
Right, but his enforcement involves the conduction, even though he is not the one who is, personally, looking at the chain and the weight and so forth.
Yeah, but
he is conducting it.
Conducting, I mean, it's pretty hard to say that overseeing is not the same as conducting.
Well, again, I'm not saying that to me as a layperson, I would read that the same way. As the lawyer who we would be asking to enforce this, he's not as content with that language. So I agree with you. I mean, Mike, I read that and I see the same thing. I think that's a clear representation of what we know that occurs.
Right.
But he likes the older language. He feels that's easier for him to defend in court, which is
So
really
Peter-
the whole purpose of all of this.
Peter wants conducts.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you can remove a site? Or do you remove a mooring?
Removal.
Was that a question for me?
Yes.
And what was the question?
Well, Paul, we had added the word that inspections, it says
No.
assign mooring sites, conduct their inspections, relocation, and/or removal of moorings. But they have stricken the term of moorings. So when I read it without that, I don't know how you remove a site. If the site exists,
Right.
you can
True.
remove a mooring from a site, but you can't
Mhm.
reroute the Damascotta River.
That's right.
So that's just for clarity, John. And
Yeah, I hear you.
I don't-
Yeah.
And I think it just reads better to have of mooring. So
Yeah. When I look at this as a layperson, I understand exactly the intent. I think I understand the intent. I'm just giving you the advice that I'm getting, which is be careful of language, because language can have unintended consequence that we wish wouldn't occur. So, yeah.
also, you don't inspect the site. So we've convoluted two functions here in one statement. Assign mooring sites, we're really assigning moorings,
Mhm.
and their inspection, their relocation, and their removal. But the very first phrase is mooring is only an adjective, it's not the noun.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I
there is,
just
yeah,
think it's a grammar issue there.
yeah. Well, I mean, the semicolon does separate the stanza there, so you do have the conduct inspections, relocation, and/or removal of moorings. So
If you leave out moorings in, I'm happy with it.
yeah.
So push for that, okay?
No, absolutely. I mean, as from what I can tell, that looks like the original language, but there's so many different red lines. It's
Yeah.
hard for
All
all of us. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go for it, Paul. Yeah, sorry.
Mike, I know you see the local waters here a lot every year, and I just want to say that I do not inspect chains, etc. Eric is taking care of that.
Right.
And I cruise around the harbor occasionally, not regularly, but occasionally, and I'm looking at the pennants that these boats are tied up with, and I have found an awful lot of them that the line is getting unlaid, it's getting twisted. There are shackles that don't have, any wire ties on them, and that's what I see. I'm not checking below the water level, but I do find a lot of mooring lines that are getting twisted up. I've had several that have gotten twisted so badly they are actually pulling the bow of the boat down when the tide gets high. So it bears watching regularly, and it's something I try to do, but I have a lot of other irons in the fire here at the boatyard.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, it certainly, and it's not a function of the inspections necessarily that Eric is doing. I mean, it's not that, but I don't know whether we should systematically, once a season, go through and have a checklist.
Yeah, yeah, it's an excellent idea because a lot can happen in a season, especially the kind of winds we've been having this year.
Yeah, I think one of the climate change things that we're seeing is a real major change in wind patterns.
Yes.
Is that something that, in terms of the annual renewal, that we can accommodate, or we can, we used to send something out, I think, with a letter in terms of like best practices, or, I mean, can we ask people to kind of keep an eye on those things, or
No.
to try to make it easier? What's the best way to help out with that? At the front end of the season, not at the back end.
I think there's too many novices involved there to depend on them to keep an eye on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. I would agree. And I think it works well now. I think Paul should have the authority to insist that, because the inspection is a point in time, once every 3 years for a certain part. So there's, 1,000 days in between.
Yes.
And
What
And
Paul is saying, he stumbles, or he sees these things that happen because of a storm or because of negligence. Yes, they would probably be caught in an inspection, but they need to be attended to immediately. And to me, that's within the powers of a harbor master that's part of, instead of that formal inspection where you document it, that's part of the ongoing inspections that I think are covered with conduct inspections.
I don't know how long people are anticipating staying on this call, but there are a lot of other things that we got to talk about. And I suggest once again that we defer further discussion of the language of the ordinance and to having Peter present and have a work session where we go through all the changes and get agreement, because I don't feel like we're making much progress here.
Yeah.
Well, there's one area I'd really like you to discuss though before we go out, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Sure.
Under section 6.1D. So this is the issue. This is the issue of transfer.
What page is it?
It's page 7, the top of page 7.
Okay.
So the original language suggests that mooring assignment permits are not transferable. And mooring equipment may be transferred, however, the location of the mooring shall be determined by the harbor master. So state law is very clear that moorings are not transferable under any circumstance.
And I think that goes back to federal language, I think from the Corps of Engineers. It's not just the state.
Yeah. So, that's one that obviously we have some language in here that's not going to work. So we would have to either go back to the prior standard, or again, if there's an attempt that we want to have, we need to start thinking about what's the goal of this.
Well, there is already a practice. There is already a practice of people transferring moorings, and
right.
And I think there's some paperwork. It could be achieved with some paperwork, I think, but it would have to be specified in this language.
It could be. I mean, there's certainly ways in which people go and they say, I'm not using it. And then there's someone paying for a mooring at the same time. And I've heard of that in other towns. That's not crazy. That's certainly something we could do, but at least as written here, we can't do it.
This is all public trust doctrine stuff. I mean, basically you're creating a private right in a public resource. And if you do that, yeah.
Precisely. Yeah. So yeah, again, if there's a goal we have, we want to go for something great, you know, but at least as written, we can't go there with the language. So
Well, I think we've got to figure out a way around the language. I mean, the practice that exists, and we've got to face up to that, because that's life. That's and we can't prohibit it because it won't wash.
Well, in a sense, I mean, it does sound like fine tuning, but to John's point, if it's a simultaneous transfer by the town from one person to another of the site, it's not actually the person directly transferring it to the other person, but the town is taking back the right, or the lease in a sense, and granting a new lease to a different person for a different fee. But the problem you're pointing to, Mike, is that in practice, there's a transfer of the mooring, and the mooring doesn't get moved, and so the site effectively gets transferred, but the technicality behind it, I guess, it sounds like is important from a legal standpoint.
Right. And
which is, it's not really one person transferring their right to another, but it's via the town.
The town is reassigning the place of the mooring from one person to another.
Yeah.
And
right.
I think
Rather than a private sale or a private transfer of some sort, you know.
But you have to speak to that too, because the equipment can be resold or should be able to be resold, because that is, isn't that owned by the current holder?
The equipment, yes, and the site, no.
Correct.
Right.
So kind of that has to be worded. And the town, and as you say, Stephen, is the middleman in this process for the site.
Yep.
And you can't have equipment without a site. So it's a three-party transaction with the middleman.
That's what lawyers are for.
Yeah, and that kind of it does tie into the next one below, which is only vessel owners may apply, you know, for non-commercial mooring permits. So again, it's more of this public trust sort of conversation that Stephen talked about. I mean, there's a practice that's going on. It's working. I think, you know, I think there's parts of it that work. But if at some point we were ever to have a waiting list, you know, that's when obviously that practice would not work as well. So I think that there's, you know, as you said, there may be ways for us to get to the end point that we were all hoping for. Just not sure that we can do it with how we have it here. So I can certainly have Peter start to work on something in advance of a subsequent meeting, so that way we at least would have a little bit down the road on this. So if that is okay with everyone, I'm glad to have him start on some of these issues in advance.
Definitely in advance. And John, we can't be unique in that. Every place that has moorings must have the same issue.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure.
We can see what other wordings there have to cover it.
I'll be happy to check with the Harbor Master Association about that section and what other towns do and what the Corps recommends too, because as I said, it really is relating to federal jurisdiction, not town.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to focus for a minute. Well,
so that's all I had. That's all I wanted to mention, Mike. So yeah, you can go on to whatever else you need to.
We can defer the rest of this to a discussion with Peter.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I want to come back. It's relating to what Paul was talking about in terms of safety stuff. You know, we've got 20 mooring permittees who are not paying. And so if we're not enforcing that, the collection of those fees, then why will anybody take us seriously about they're not complying with other parts of our requirements? I mean, we're setting a really bad precedent if we don't do something about these scofflaws. And I'm very disappointed to see that 1/3 of these scofflaws are commercial guys. It's the oyster guys. Oh, and oh no, and it's John. Who's the motorboat guy? John
Trainer?
Tran. Yeah. But I mean, in a lot of harbors, there's a premium paid for commercial use of moorings. We don't choose to do that. But I think that we can and should, and I'm quite willing to make phone calls and engage these scofflaws and do some collection. But I mean, I think for us to maintain that we have these regulations and not enforce them, and when we're not even getting the money from the people who are renting the places that we're assigning to them, we're not doing our job. So I'd like a little discussion about how we should proceed to do this. Added to which we have Ed White, who is, I don't know whether he's just someone who doesn't like regulations or what, but I don't know who had the conversation with him. I think it was David Belknap way back when. May have had the conversation with him, but he's got 2 moorings and he doesn't pay. And it's not because, it's because he doesn't believe that we have the right to collect the money from him for his use of the space out in front of his house.
I believe he would say it's grandfathered because he had the moorings prior to having an ordinance. And therefore he believes that he's outside of the ordinance.
Yeah.
If it were on land, that would be true, but clearly in the water, that's not true because the waters belong to the people of the state of Maine. So if we have the right to establish fair lease expenses for private or sort of enclosing the public trust on a temporary basis through the use of a mooring. So certainly no legal ground to stand on in America.
I like Bernie's idea. Let's invite him in and hear him, because he's just told people that have asked him, and he may not accept, but
What does the town do if people don't pay their car registration fees?
Well, they'd have a problem with the police department, I do believe. Yeah. So there's always an enforcement arm for every action. This could go as far as sending the sheriff's department after him if we wished. At direction of the harbor master. I mean, you can go pretty far, but that doesn't. There may be a smoother approach perhaps you can employ.
Well, as I said, I'm prepared to phone people and lean on them and make the argument that they pay their car registration. This is just like that, and we need it to pay the salary that's not taken by our harbor master.
And of course, the administrative costs. I mean, I was looking at the ins and outs, and it doesn't. I don't think there's not a line item billing of town staff to the budget center. So effectively, even though it may look net positive, it's probably a break even or not, depending on how much time's involved, probably less so. So and that's not to say it's not well worth it, because we're getting a service which is a safer harbor, but that's just to say that there's a need even beyond what's collected. So we certainly need to collect everything collectible.
Well, I mean, one alternative is when the renewals go out, that we give them a fine for non-payment. That's what happens with other governmental entities when the payments aren't made. People get fined.
Or like back taxes, there's a percentage carry, which is essentially a fine, but and that's laid out well. It creates a disincentive to wait to pay, but it also recognizes occasionally there's a missed permit or a piece of paperwork got lost during COVID, that sort of thing, and so it sort of creates a premium for that oversight, but isn't super punitive in year one, and you could sort of up it to a certain point each year, or there's a penalty for delay.
Right, and
Establish fines. Would that have to go through a town meeting, or can you, John, sign off on fines for the towns through the towns?
Yeah, I think if the harbor committee I think you have the ability to set the fees at present. So I think you could include in that fee schedule a late payment fee or however, something along that line of thinking. I think we could easily assess that as part of pay by a certain date. One thing I think we've done quite well is trying to get the applications out in a more timely manner in the springtime. And I think so. Probably when I first started here, I might have been less, let's have a date by. But I think at this point we have a good system in place that your committee's really kind of helped to foster, and the office is working quite well in that regard. I think if at some point, maybe at the next meeting you could set a date after July 1st, whatever date you think is satisfactory, and after that date there's a certain amount after. I think of dog fees, for example, is probably one that's most applicable to this. Maybe less so than car registrations, Mike. But no, Gisela, I'm not kidding. but there's to register your dog is less than $10, but the fee is 5 times that or 3 times that amount. So there's a real incentive there to do this in a timely manner. I understand there's a seasonality to what we do in the harbor that's a little bit different, but you all would have the best sense of that. But that may be a good approach. I would support that.
And it's certainly rational in the sense that $20 or $30 today is worth more to the town than $30 2 years from now. It literally has less value later. So that's a fair, and that's why we have the tax late payment cost, because the town's losing money on revenue they don't have, and they're essentially, the people not paying are borrowing from the town.
Mm-hmm.
So that's justification, I mean, in terms of fairness.
So I think it's in the same way that the Harbor Committee sets the fees for the moorings. We can set up our fine schedule. So I think it should be a minimum of $10 a year. And in some cases, we've got 2 and even 3 years. Okay. Ed White is 5 years.
And I like the language that you used, John, which was late payment fee or something like that, because it's basically, because there are a couple of things going on. One is the borrowing of the money. The other is the additional administrative burden on the town to collect that, which takes time and probably costs ultimately more than $5 or $10 even to do that second outreach. I mean, one call from you and a follow-up letter or something might be half an hour or more of your time. So that's a tangible expense.
And I would also say there's a bit of economies of this to handle. We send out this letter within 6 weeks. We have almost all of everyone's got, they have them in, they've got their dinghy sticker, they've got their parking pass. It's a beautiful thing. Once you get outside that 6 weeks and you have someone came in 3-4 weeks later, the wheels of things start to grind a little bit more it's a bit more challenging to grind those gears. So yeah, I agree. The more we can keep everyone in that, a timely fashion. Again, I don't know what that date would be, but I think you all may have, is that July 1? Is the boating season effectively begun at that point and everyone should be, registered at that, I don't know. But after that point, perhaps then it's a question of, do we send a letter, Mike calling around? That's been very effective in the past, I think. But
Well,
open to a lot of different ideas.
I think for local people, as opposed to summer people, boating season starts closer to June 1st than July 1st.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What would you say, Paul?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And I don't know what the plan is in terms of when Michelle or Shelley's going to send the invoices out, but I think we got to wait a few months before we send those out.
Yeah.
Well, what about a little discussion? Anybody think that $10 a year is enough? You think we should be more punitive?
Well, the dog fee is $6. The punitive thing is 25. So that's a different relation. But I think that's not enough. Or I vote that the dog fee goes down. So no, I don't think 10 is, I don't know.
I think that seems reasonable. And maybe it's 10 for the first year you're late, and at $20 if you're late for the second year. So it's a total of 30 if you're late for if you're 2 years behind, say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
That sounds good. I was just my bartender just arrived.
Oh, all right.
Mike, the thing that complicates this are some of our commercial people who don't pay also have the non-compliant dinghies, which is perhaps one reason they don't pay. Because theoretically we wouldn't allow their dinghy when they.
You're just saying they're committed scofflaws.
Well, that's right. And I don't know what they do about their, if they have moorings as well. Is that what they weren't paying the moorings, is that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, the Pemaquid guys have at least two that they're paying late.
Well,
Three. No, two. And Tony Simmons has three that she's 2 years late on all of them, each of them. So it's going to cost her a bundle. And Trina has two. So
you were offering to make calls. Do you want to like the librarians do when they change their fee schedule. They call everybody and say, or they put a note in the mail that there's a forgiveness period until May 1. And thereafter, these will be the fees.
Oh, that's a good, yeah,
Good idea, David.
I like that.
Yeah, and that's fair too, because if we were to implement something new, that is a different situation. They were making actually a decision that was based upon a previous set of policies. So yeah, I like that idea.
So
Yeah.
early payment saves you money.
Well, no, it's not necessarily early because they're 2 or 3 years late, but payment before the fines, before don't call them fines. The late payment fee is instituted.
Mhm.
There's a grace period there.
Yep.
For past
Good.
due.
Right.
But
Can
we
I
have
off-
to know what the fee is, and you have to tell them that if, pay now or pay more later.
There you go. Here's another, not to complicate things, but here's another idea. The most well-read section of the town report every year is not my report. It's actually who hasn't paid taxes.
Oh,
And we
right.
could put these unpaid moorings in our book if that's something we wish to pursue. It's an idea.
The
Yeah.
wall of shame, yes.
The stocks, put your head in. That's an old New England tradition, right?
That's right. Shame.
Not everybody reads this because not everybody is from Newcastle. So
That's true.
commercial fishermen people there, but still we can put it in the Lincoln County News.
Yeah,
Along with next to the police report.
There you go.
No, worse yet, we can post it in all the local post offices.
That's
It's
right.
posters.
Yeah.
Wanted.
Yeah.
That's right. Fantastic.
We
I
said,
think we ought to
Maybe get the milk companies to run it on the side of their milk cartons. Have you seen this man or this kid?
I think the amount of fee should correlate with the length of the dinghy. So if you have a big dinghy, they need to pay more with their.
$1 per foot.
That's it.
Well, we really have not been addressing that issue head on. We've got maybe 3 or 4 aluminum boats that are longer. I think we now say 12 feet, do we not? In
this
the
current draft, it says 12.
yeah. So we have a couple of 14 footers that we don't have a crowding problem. Like, I don't know if you've ever been down to Round Pond in the summer in August, but you need a shoehorn to get boats in. I mean, it's a zoo, and we never come close to that kind of crowdedness.
If we had a beam requirement as well as a length requirement, wouldn't that accentuate our problem? And beam is where we have problems with having enough room. I mean, we haven't really had a crisis yet, like Round Pond, but we're close to it.
Yeah, it's in the inflatables that are the beam problem.
Well, and any 14-foot boat usually is a beam problem too, isn't it?
No, not. I mean, they're still only a little 2.5 feet instead of 3.5 feet, and maybe even 4 feet for an inflatable.
Okay.
Well, Paul, are you still with us?
Yes.
So, do you have any thoughts about these oversized guys?
I don't want to have to name a number here.
Well, we already named it though. We already, in the, at least in the revised ordinance that we have not, the draft ordinance that we have not decided finally on, we do say 12 feet.
Was an
I
increase from the original 10.
I thought at the last meeting we had, it had been reduced to 11 feet.
Bernie's not here to, he would be the only one that would have.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Well, that's neither here nor there, really, tonight.
Right. Oh, we were, we're not going to be able to resolve that. So we've agreed on the $10 per year, and if they pay by, what should we set as the deadline? June 1st? May 31st?
Maybe as late as July 1st.
That's true. Some of the, I mean, people who don't live here, the summer people, that would be a courtesy for them.
Mhm.
Is it a straight line, $10 a year, or $10 for the first year and increasing in the subsequent years? I heard both, I thought.
Well, I like that. Be a fun conversation with Ed White. Because he's 5 years in arrears.
But he'll definitely want to get in by the grace period.
Right. And he's got 2 moorings.
Mhm.
So, but we need to be prepared to do something if he doesn't pay. I'm pretty sure he's not going to pay.
Well, I think our town manager has suggested the sheriff. I mean, do you know what happens? What's the procedure in terms of car registrations that haven't been paid?
Well, they'd have an unregistered motor vehicle, and so they'd be, fined initially, and then if they continue, they'd be potentially, the car would be impounded and they'd be arrested. Hopefully, we don't have to get to that extent here. In our ordinance, it says if there's in response to non-compliance with any provision, the harbor master, Debbie harbor master may deny a permit application, revoke a permit, or direct mooring tackle to be removed from the waters at the owner's expense, and be subject to all other penalties under this ordinance. So we already have the authority to do at least that. We could also involve, we can involve the authorities if we needed to. But I think, we could go quite far with this if we wished. I think the one that kind of strikes to me is removing the mooring tackle from the water.
Yeah.
That's obviously a pretty,
At the owner's expense.
yeah, indeed.
So that doesn't fall on our shoulders. We simply ask Eric to do it, and he gets paid.
Mhm.
Of course, are they going to pay to remove the mooring that they haven't paid for?
Right. Well, then I think we'd employ my friend Mr. Drum to go to a Wiscasset, and we'd compel him to pay in another capacity. So I think we would be well within our powers to do all of those things, and to ensure our bottom line is held. It's it's the rule of law, right? Everyone's talking about rule of law. This is what this is, and it seems $40 a year is not a lot, but 5 years, 2 moorings, late fees on top. If, as you said, Mike, if we don't do this, or all of you have said it in one way or another, if we don't do this, then what's next? And if we can't hold firm, so we can have a last best offer and say, look, we've tried. We want to work through this with you, but this is where we are. regretfully.
Should we, should the late fee be, let's get closure on that, if I'm gonna make these calls. $10 for the first year, and if you're 2 years or 3 years, it's what, goes up 20 the second, 30 the third, or more steeply?
You can do the math easily if it's consecutive. but
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, $10 for the first year, an extra $20 for the second year, an extra $30 for the third year, and so on. And if we want to cut it off at a certain point, I mean, it seems like a misunderstanding of the law. In a sense, it's like, well, we're not charging you for your own mooring, we're charging you for the lease of public trust resource, which is this section of the river. So that's there. Yeah, we have solid ground to stand on.
It'll have to be published though before we collect,
Hmm.
the fact that
Absolutely.
we're going to.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yep.
Well, I think we should get a story in the Lincoln County News that the Harbor Committee is getting tough because we've got so many scofflaws.
We're attempting to promote fairness, because otherwise it's just like a voluntary tax or something.
Yeah.
Or a,
And as you pointed out, this is public trust property that's being rented,
mhm.
and we're just agents for
Yeah.
the state.
And it's to some degree scarce. I mean, it is scarce, certainly, as you get into the upper harbor.
I still
Right.
think we need to find some kind of solution for Ed White, because he's a prominent Damariscotta resident, and I think there will be some heel digging. I don't have a solution, but I think it's he's making it's really not the money he's worried
Right.
about. It's just frankly, I don't understand what his deal is, but if we strong arm him, I think the Harbor Committee could get, or yeah, it could become a big thing. And I don't want to
I
link
think they, didn't they sell their house on the river?
I don't know. Did they?
I don't know, it was for sale, I think.
Yeah, I talked to some people who were moving in this fall. So I wonder whether this is moot.
No, they had two houses. They had the one that they next door rented, Airbnb or whatever. So I have a feeling that one was for sale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, Paul, did you have a conversation with him what his big deal was?
You're talking about Dr. White?
Yes.
Yes. He sent a lengthy letter to the town.
I remember that. Yeah. He didn't think that his moorings are under the jurisdiction of the town, right?
Well, no, he says he's grandfathered.
I'm not sure of that. I thought that's what I remember.
I think you're right. I think he was claiming that he's always had a mooring there. His mooring predates the towns having
Ordinance.
created the harbor district.
Yeah, but he can't apply grandfathering himself. I mean, grandfathering usually comes from the committee or organ that actually puts in new policies.
Yeah.
And I mean, my mooring down here at Little Point should be grandfathered then as well, and many other moorings. So that's not really an argument, I think.
Grantee does not grandfather himself.
Yes.
Right.
Well, that's where I think that if you were planning to call him, that you invite him in, give him this chance for forgiveness, no fees, but we are putting a fee in, and we know that this has been an issue with him, obviously. Come talk to us why it's an issue.
So are you saying we should offer him, if he pays his 5 years worth of back mooring permit fees, that he's not going to get fined if he does it before whatever we said is the date?
Right,
He doesn't get slapped with the late fees,
correct.
so he can save himself a bundle.
Actually, that would be true for everybody.
Yeah, not just
You know? So if you pay by that date, your stuff, then you don't get slapped with a back fee.
Right.
So
And I think you're going to have to send actually letters to, document it. Your phone call
right.
is
Should
not
come
a permanent
after-
record.
Should come after the invoices,
A letter should be,
and the letter will carry the dates.
Yeah.
And the fee schedule.
and a postage paid envelope.
Yeah, we can afford that.
But before we send this letter, I think we should invite Ed White to talk to us and say, what's the deal with you? What are you doing? And telling him that we're planning this fee structure, and kind of try to be nice about it first. And then, because I really think this could be kind of ripping these towns apart, and we're just trying to come together again after all this, what's going on in the county news. So
You don't think we should have the sheriff come to that meeting with us?
no, we're gonna arm Paul, give him a weapon.
I heard that.
All right. Well, all that I have left here that is not at all critical is the DMR held a meeting with the oyster farmers to talk about marking, differential marking of surface and bottom leases, and that discussion is still ongoing. There is still some consideration of having different colors, and I just wanted to announce that had happened. And our only other responsibility is, and John, I'm sure that Shelley charged you with this, we're supposed to decide what color we want the stickers to be this year. Isn't that an important decision of ours?
The most important, really.
So what are the choices?
I think it's any color in the rainbow, honestly. I think last year we went with white, I believe.
Yeah,
that was the first year. So
that was dull and boring.
I know. Sorry. This is why we need a committee decision for this.
I like the idea that she picks the color.
I agree.
Yeah, good call. Yeah. And that it just changed over time.
Right. So
She wanted to know how many. She brought 60 last year and used 40 some. They can't be that expensive, are they?
They're like, I think they're $2 each.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So.
Well, so if we use 45, there are 15 that Doug can use. That's $30 that we have to eat. I think we can afford that because we're going to get all this scofflaw money.
They want stickers, right?
Yeah.
What if they all paid? Huh?
They'll all be proud and wanted to display their current chartreuse stickers.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we accomplished a lot for not having done anything for a year.
Yeah.
You think we can do something sooner than a year with Mr. Trump?
I think so. I think we can. Yeah. I think we can get something. So let me just very quickly talk about in terms of ordinance change. So we still don't know exactly what our town meeting is going to look like in June. We're still waiting. The legislature is still working on how that will happen. If what I think happens, we'll be on a very normal cycle and we'll vote just as we always have in June. And these would be changes that would be on the ballot, which people would, just simply check off. And Damascotta has the same process as we do, or similar process as we do. So I think if we could, get something in place for the boards of selectmen to review, perhaps early April, I don't see any issue for either town having it on their warrant and having it approved in June.
Well, it would be great if we could get together with Peter in late February.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll absolutely talk to him and see if we can schedule something to have him join in the crew and
Week of the
hopefully-
22nd, maybe?
So,
Yeah.
Week of the 22nd of February, that week, possibly. The week before is school vacation.
Mhm. Yeah. We'll go after vacation week. That would be perfect.
Yeah.
And so I can get Peter here, and then we can maybe quickly dispense with any changes, and then we'll be ready to go.
Great. Well,
And I'd love to be able to be at a point after that, maybe shortly thereafter, we would send out those notices. I know that seems early, but if we can give 2 months notice for between the time of when you say go ahead and we send out all those notices for renewal, I think it gives everyone a lot more time, and particularly if we're going to institute some changes with late fees, more time the better, perhaps.
Absolutely.
so does everybody agree with, was David wanted to have Ed White come into the meeting, right?
well, I was giving him that opportunity if he still feels exercised and does not plan to accept your offer of forgiveness if it's by a certain time, that come talk to us.
I don't know if he's here in the wintertime or not.
I think he's in France, but I also think maybe we should find in the archives that letter to see what
Yeah,
the issue was.
I thought I had it. I'm sure it's in the files, in the town files.
Well,
Yeah.
why
I'm
don't
sure I have a copy of it.
Bet you do, Paul. Why don't you two look that over then,
Yeah, and I'll distribute it to everybody.
or make
Okay.
a judgment call? Yeah.
All
Even
right.
if in France, we could use Zoom with him.
Well, email works even over there.
And so does Zoom. I think that our fine schedule should be a part of that mailing that's
Yep.
going out. And
With the date.
and the notice that we're having a forgiveness period. Just
Let's say
until May 1 or May 30th or something,
let's say June 1.
June 1. Same as when we need to have them active, right? What do we say, July 1 for the other?
July
Per-
1.
Okay. Good.
Well,
Every time the towns are mentioned, I never hear anything about Noblesboro. Now, they should be one of the towns involved with waters of this river.
and they're in the ordinance, right?
I believe it was talked about. I don't know that it ever happened.
No, it is it's in the ordinance. Hold on just a second.
So right now it's an interlocal agreement only between Damascotta and Newcastle. I would have no issue with them being a part of it too, Paul. I think that would be a great thing. Yeah.
Okay.
All they would have to do is they would have to similarly adopt the ordinance as, basically as we've drafted or amended. And, the way it's set up right now is, of course, with those 3 seats for each community. But, there's certainly ways in which we can change that. The sanitary district, Noblesboro is also a party to that, even though there's more seats for Damascotta and Newcastle. So, I mean, there's a way to get there. Absolutely.
Sure.
Edgecombe isn't included, right?
No.
They've just hired or are hiring a harbor master.
Oh, wow.
For Noblesboro, could it have been a factor of the Great Salt Bay Marine Protected Area or the Shellfish Reserve that since there's no bottom disturbance, that potentially there wouldn't be placement of, I can't remember offhand if that restricted the placement of moorings within the Marine Protected Area, but that would then, if it did, that would then preclude the Noblesboro shoreline that's on the Damascotta River, at least. I'll take a look at that just to see if I'm recalling that. It's really, I haven't read it in a long time.
Great. All right. So we will set our next meeting around the availability of your town attorney.
I'm sure if we could do something similar late afternoon, I would suspect it's a lot easier to get the town attorney on a late afternoon, as long as he doesn't have a court case, than a night, because obviously he's got other town meetings at a current night. So this is a great time of day for him. If this works for the rest of you, that would be probably ideal, I suspect.
Yeah, this is a good time of day. Yeah.
Great. Great.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you all.
I think we made some good decisions.
Likewise.
We'll get those scofflaws after all.
Well, let's see.
Is that a challenge?
Hey.
You want to make some of the calls. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Take care. We'll see you.
Good, everybody.